I'm Mac. Welcome to episode 3 of season 2. To all that listened to episode 2, today we're building off of that. And no, I'm not going to drag you through another crazy story. Maybe I'll make some references. But today is diving deeper into the topic of knowing when to leave. Which, per usual, you're probably wondering to yourself, what do you mean? Like, knowing when to leave what? And whatever you're thinking is exactly what I'm talking about. Knowing when to leave anything. Knowing when to leave the party. We've all been there. Knowing when to leave the job. I think we've also all been there. Knowing when to leave the relationship. Again, I think we've all been there. And I can go on, which is why I'm going to spend roughly around the next hour or so talking about why knowing when to leave is so important. I think, feeding off of the last episode, which if you didn't get a chance to listen to, it was a story time. So prepare yourself because it's definitely an intense situation that took place. But I think the biggest takeaway from that situation is knowing when to leave and trusting your gut instinct. And that's what today's topic is. Knowing when to leave. So, thanks for joining me again. Let's get right into it. I want to start at a place of juvenile, which I think is a funny word. Anyone that knows me knows that's why that's a funny word. We'll get into that a whole nother day. If you think about your childhood, I think a lot of people have a hard time leaving certain situations based off the fundamentals of childhood, right? And what I mean by that is everyone's situation is so different, but when I look at mine, I look at the overall concept of my life and my childhood specifically and how that plays a role in my ability to leave or the lack thereof, maybe is how I should say it. And the whole concept of leaving dynamics and situations that aren't good. But again, referencing my childhood specifically, my parents split when I was about 7, 8-ish. So I was pretty young. And looking at it dynamically, as a child, I don't think it really affected me. However, looking at it from a scope of a 22-year-old, it sure as hell affected me, right? And I think looking at my parents' relationship from an outward scope, there probably should have been a divide, or they probably should have left the situation prior to when it took place. And although I don't really recall them being together, as crazy as that sounds, I do know from what I do recall and from the information I've been given now as an adult that there was a lot of unhealthy tendencies and things that occurred that probably would have ended in a better resolution than they did if they would have left earlier. And again, like I said, although I don't feel my parents' divorce affected me that deeply, unlike other children, I now as an adult am like, oh dear God, I will not have a child with someone unless I know good and well I'm dying with that person. Because I think a lot of children, unfortunately, when they're in split households, more specifically in split households that don't parent together, it causes this, I don't want to say lifelong, because I don't want people to be like worried for themselves or even worried about me specifically, but it definitely causes long-term issues. Again, knowing when to leave, right? Because when you don't have that maternal and paternal reference of what a relationship should look like and healthy boundaries and knowing what is healthy versus what's unhealthy, then how are you ever going to know to walk away from something, right? Again, going back to the topic of knowing when to leave the party, the work, the relationship. How do you know what a bad party is if you've never been to a party, right? And I think that's what a lot of my examples today are going to draw back to, is because I never had good relationship examples, the lack of that led into not having good friendship examples. And then led into not having good work examples, and so on and so forth. So at the end of this conversation today, I want to be able to find a resolution for not only myself, but to anyone that can resonate with this, that resonates with this. How do you know when to leave? Because in so many situations, the answer doesn't come out of the beginning and you have to play things out to get the resolution that you're wanting or you're needing. But at the same time, I use the reference so often to my friends of being dragged. And I've been in many situations, again, party, work, relationship wise, of being dragged, being in something that I thought was going to be long term, and it wasn't. It was very much so short term. And at the end of the day, if you're learning from it, then that is a win. However, I think a lot of us look back at situations and dynamics and are like, damn, I wasted so much time. I wasted so much energy. I could have been doing X, Y, or Z. And instead, we were in a situation that was consuming of our time. So again, to circle this back to childhood, I think taking the time to reflect over your childhood and the impact that your parentals had on your decision making, because this whole topic it's around decision making, right? And decision making for a lot of us is difficult because, again, we never had a reference to look up to. So maybe this is a good time to take a step back and truly visualize your childhood and the examples that you had, and were those examples that you want to implement into your life, or were they not? And again, I think we can all take the time to look at that and kind of build from there. So again, going off of that, as I said, oh, my last episode was a story time. This is going to be, not a story time. I'm always going to have stories, right? Like, I'm never not going to have stories to go with these situations, because why would I be talking about needing to leave the party, the relationship, the job, the friendship, the whatever your situation is, if I haven't walked that walk? So let's start with the party. This is an insane story to put on the internet, and I'm definitely going to modify it, but you'll get the point. I can look at so many times of my life, and again, as I started with childhood, I can look at even younger times of my life where I was at, parties where I probably shouldn't have been, or was in a situation that I shouldn't have been. But this one, even though this is in a later stage of my life, it really sticks out to me of, why the fuck did you not leave this situation? In my past life, I'm not going to be very specific, but I'm going to be specific enough to where you get my point. I have always worked in retail, specifically over the past 5 or so years in operations. So what that means is a lot of my job consisted of inventory control, and a lot of times when I had inventories, they would be at the ass crack of dawn. And so I will never forget that my friends were wanting to come in town for the weekend, and I typically had weekends off, and this inventory happened to be on a Sunday because we didn't open until noon, and so theoretically you'd have until 6 until noon to knock it out. Did that ever happen? No, not the point of the story, but that never happened. My friends were all coming into town, and they of course wanted to go out every night, including the Sunday night that they were there. And I was like, well, we just need to be back in the house at a decent time because I have inventory tomorrow and I cannot miss this. Like, these inventories were really like life or death. We go out, have a jolly old time, end up being out like super late. And the funny thing is, earlier in that night, there was a specific person in my life that kept convincing me, oh, like, you don't need sleep. Sleep is for the weak. You're young. You're this, you're that. But I know in my gut, like, no, like, you have to be at this inventory. A lot of the times when I, like, drink and don't have sleep, it really ramps up my anxiety. And I know that subconsciously. Like, I know that. So I don't, again, going into the situation, I don't know why I thought this was going to play out in my favor. So anyway, I look at my phone. It's now 4 a.m. I have to be at work in 2 hours, and I'm drunk as fuck. And I'm like, oh God, this is a bad situation. Like, what are you gonna do? And so I start having a panic attack and I'm like drunk and panicking and not knowing what to do. And all my friends are like, now telling me, oh, like, call law. Again, this is so terrible to share on the internet because you should never do this. And I think that's why I share this, because let's just replay this whole situation. Had inventory, were with friends that definitely supported things that were probably not positive in my life. Missing work. All of those things don't stand for them at all. Like, at all. I don't stand for supporting, like, pushing people to do things that you knew that they had shared that they didn't want to do. I support missing work if needed, but on a regular basis, I'm a very at work every day, there early, leave late type of person. So for me to do something like that was just, it wasn't okay at all. I will never forget, not only did I not go to work, I was like extremely depressed for days because I was so mad at myself because I missed work. I knew when I went back to work the next day, I was going to get ripped. It was for what? Like, I'm not going to lie, that night was terrible because I was panicking the whole time about work. And so, again, this goes back to the party and when to leave and that whole idea of just when to leave a situation. Even back to my episode from last month, it's like my gut in all these situations was telling me this is a terrible idea. What are you doing? Why are we doing this? But unfortunately, I think a common denominator in all these situations is the influence of others and those around you. And recently, I've been so proud of myself. I'm literally getting teary-eyed about this, and I shouldn't. So let's laugh for a second to get those tears to go the hell away. But I've been so proud of myself because I have completely disconnected myself from people in my life that have that type of influence on me, that when I look at it from an outward scope, I realize bring more negativity than good. And people that jeopardize things that matter to me, like my job, right? And so over about the past 5 or so months, I've made pretty conscious, continuous efforts to separate myself from those that cause me to want to stay at the party, right? And I think as we go through all these different topics and personal situations for myself of, man, I fucked up and what am I going to do next time to be better? That's all you can do. And it sucks because you look back at situations, again, that was just one situation, and that's a very PG version of that story. And I have a lot of other stories where, alcohol was involved and I was intoxicated and I did things that I regret, and it was because I was around certain people that, you know what I mean? And the ball keeps rolling and rolling and rolling because that's any situation in your life. And again, going back to what I saw growing up, I maybe didn't see my parents or other people around me surrounding themselves with the best individuals or individuals that made them their best self. And so I didn't have an idea of what that looked like. But at the end of the day, I don't use that as an excuse, And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, when it comes to any topic of conversation, will be like, well, I went through this, or, growing up, I had this happen to me, or this happened to me. I can pull that apart too, right? I can say that I have the inability to have healthy relationships because I never saw healthy relationships. Or I can say I have difficult time having relationships because I was assaulted. Or I can say, you know what I mean? Like, this list goes on and on. But that's an excuse at the end of the day. And when it comes down to anything, I'm now going on a whole sidetrack conversation, but I want to finish this thought because it's important and it's relevant. At the end of the day, I want this to be a platform where you're holding yourself accountable to things of your past, whether that was self-inflicted or others were inflicted. And regardless of, maybe it's something that you had a part of, but at the end of the day, someone did things to you that are, unforgivable or not okay. You still have the power at the end of the day to hold yourself accountable and be better. Because you can't play that role for anyone else. You can't play that role for your parents. You can't play that role for your friends. You can't play that role for your boyfriend, your ex-boyfriend, your ex-girlfriend, you're this, you're that. You can't play that role. The only role you can play is you. You're your main character. You're your own embodiment. And you have to take ownership of these situations and know when to fucking leave. Okay? Back to the topic. You need to know when to leave. So, alternating from that, onto the conversation of wanting to know to leave the job. As I just talked about, oh my God, I called off on that job. Worst mistake of my life. Yada, yada, whatever. No, it wasn't. I just did terrible things and didn't show up to work, and that was that. But, kind of going into that, I never wanted to get too in depth into the conversation, so I might not give you the full explanation that you might want to hear. The job I just left, I should have left that job probably 6 months after starting it. And a lot of you might ask why. I don't want to get too specific into things, just for my sake and my future career and for those that I did have the opportunity to work around. But I think just in all generality, we've all been in a situation career-wise. I don't want to say we've all. Anyone that's been in an established career knows what it's like to be in an unhealthy work environment. And I want to speak in all generality to protect my past career, my future career, and anything that comes about, even though I just told a story about me not going to work, but it was because I was around bad people. But not the point. The point is unfortunately, when it comes to work and the topic of knowing when to leave, work is probably the top of my list because of an experience I faced. And I think it's important to talk about work-life balance when it comes to this topic, because a lot of people deal with this and it's a really fucked up thing, right? Like, again, tearing up right now, in which, sometimes I wish these episodes were on video, because you're like, why is this girl getting sad about this? But it's real. And the inspiration for this episode was actually from fucking LinkedIn, believe it or not. And I know that's probably very surprising, but I saw a post on LinkedIn that legitimately said, knowing when to leave is so important. The party, the job, the relationship. That's literally going to be the title of this episode. Why? Because that is my life. And specifically on LinkedIn, I really relate to that because I'm on LinkedIn heavily, because I have, 1, no social media, and 2, am a very career-driven person. It's pretty much the center of my universe. And when I saw that post, I was like, wow. And there's a couple other posts on LinkedIn that I want to share because they're so major. I'm going to see if I can pull them up really quickly. Where is it? Oh, here's a great one. Oh my God, here's a great one. You deserve a job that allows you to sleep peacefully at night. That probably sounds so insane to anyone with a normal job, okay? And if you have a healthy job with positive work culture, those are claps. I'm clapping for you, because that is beautiful and that is hard to come by. And how I know this is, 1, I've walked the walk. 2, I also am fortunate enough to have a circle of people in my life that have also walked the walk. But I just want to be very clear. When you start to realize that you are in a work environment, that you are at 40 hours minimum a week, keep in mind that is majority of your life. You spend majority of your life more than any other place working, typically. The average Joe, okay? And I'm speaking for the average Joe here. When you are in an environment that much, it is majorly crucial. I want to highlight that. It's majorly crucial that it is healthy, unproblematic, and overall positive to your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. And unfortunately, There is a study, again, it's on LinkedIn. Shout out LinkedIn. LinkedIn, if you want to, put a girl on, I'm here. Anyway, there's a study that shows majority, meaning over 50% of people in the workforce work in a unhealthy job environment that has poor culture, right? And I look at the jobs that I've walked in my life, and every single one of them had, I'm just going to say, negative work culture. And that's horrible. Like, why is that a thing? I don't understand that. I truly don't. Because at the end of the day, we're all here to get a job done and to have the most positive, healthy, happy, successful life. I'm pretty sure. And if you're not, then you probably shouldn't work. You should probably go check yourself into a mental hospital. And I mean that genuinely. And that's coming from someone that, deals with mental health. So, like, if that's not your overall agenda when you come to a job, is to just put your best foot forward and be a good human being, then you probably need to do some self-reflection. And that is not for others to figure out for you, okay? Anyway, my point is unfortunately I've worked in a lot of unhealthy job environments, and I think looking back at, some of my career endeavors, I knew well before leaving that it was time to go. Well before leaving. I'm talking years before leaving. And that's most people. Most people are walking the walk or in a job that they know for years, sometimes a decade, before they actually make the decision. And it's like, why are we doing this? Like, as a culture, why are we doing this? And honestly, the episode should have just been specifically on work, because I can go on and on about the fact that America as a whole has such an unhealthy work-life balance, and it's fucked. It's fucked. It's fucked. Average Joe, again, I'm talking about people that are working 9-to-5 jobs. I'm not talking about anyone outside of that. You could still have unhealthy job culture if you're not in a 9-to-5 or, a typical American job. It might not be 9-to-5. It might fluctuate. But atypical jobs, people find themselves in very unhealthy job environments. So anyway, as I go on this whole tangent, what's the solution? Right? We're here to find solutions. We're here to make our lives better. So what are we going to do to be better in this situation? Well, multiple things. One, I keep shouting out LinkedIn, and I feel like at this point, I need some sort of partnership or deal, because I'm really giving them the upper hand on this episode. So again, LinkedIn, I'm an advocate. I love you, and I'm about to shout you out again. So if anyone that even knows or has a cousin or a cousin's friend's cousin that works at LinkedIn, let me know so we can get the ball rolling. But anyway, where I was going with that is that use LinkedIn, use Indeed, use these platforms and these social media tools and techniques to put yourself out there. You're never trapped. You can be in a job for 3 months, 3 years, 3 decades. I don't care. If you feel like you're in an environment that is not making you better and is making you bitter, then you need to get the hell out. Because all it's going to cause is built up anger and long-term issues. And I know that sounds like maybe a little harsh, but I truly mean that. Again, walking the walk, I have worked jobs that I have literally had so much anger and depression because of them, and I allowed it to snowball and get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'm still dealing with it. And I know that sounds crazy, because you're like, it's a job. Girl, it's not like this was your 10-year-long relationship. No, but it feels like that. When you're somewhere for 40 hours a week, minimum, I'm talking between 40 and 60 hours. You might as well call that your boyfriend, okay? You're spending more time there than with your boyfriend, so we might as well call it that. So, yeah, this is pivotal. This is important. This is a very major decision that you need to make in life that you know is healthy and positive for you overall as an individual. It is. So again, what's the decision we're making? We're using different techniques and methods to put ourselves out there. Like I said, LinkedIn, Indeed, even going to job fairs and things such as that, but putting yourself out there so that you know that you're not trapped. Again, I'm going to have an episode dedicated to the topic of work and work culture at some point. But just, because today we're on the topic of knowing when to leave, when you feel uncomfortable, leave. Okay? And I haven't even gotten into the relationship topic yet, but we've crossed out parties because that was on the LinkedIn thing, the little LinkedIn I don't want to call it a meme. What would you call that? It's just a LinkedIn post. The LinkedIn post said, knowing when to leave, the job, the party, the relationship. I was like, this is beautiful. We're going to talk about this today because we all relate to that. And so we talked about the party. Now we're talking about work. And both of these come down to your gut feeling and gut instinct. When you know you're being put in a position that makes you uncomfortable, whatever that is. Again, at the party, like I said, knowing that I had work the next day, but still making the decisions I made resulted the way it resulted, right? Now looking at the job, being in the job, knowing how I was feeling every day, that I was spoken to in an ill manner, I was spoken down to, I was taken advantage of, comments were made about my gender, race, ethnicity, so on and so forth. A list begins to come about of, these things are making me uncomfortable. And when you're put in that place, you leave. Okay? We don't need to sit and weigh out the pros and cons. There's some things we do, okay? And I've been in situations and I've had people be like, make a list, pros and cons. But some things are non-negotiables. Your mental health, non-negotiable. Your physical health, non-negotiable. Your emotional health, non-negotiable. Any of your morals, non-negotiables. These are all non-negotiables. And again, back to the party thing. If a party, a person, a situation, a job makes you question yourself or question what you're doing, you need to leave. Okay? Don't sit. Don't play pretend because, all these people are out right now. Like, I want to be around. No, it's not cute. It's not. Being around people that make you do things that are against your morals is not cute. Working in a job where people make you question who you are, your work ethic, who you are as a true individual, that's really bizarre. Okay? It's really bizarre and you need to leave. And that's it. It's honestly not that. It is a complex because, again, like I said, it's layers. You look at your childhood, you look at your upbringing, you look at your young adult years, your adult years, and so on and so forth. And you realize that you are the way you are because of your environment. You're a product of your own environment, as they all say. But then when you really look at the dynamics and the situations, it's really not that complicated. Anytime your soul and your body and your emotions come alive and tell you, this isn't cute, this isn't right, this doesn't make me feel good, you need to go. It's quite simple, honestly. You need to go. So that's where I'm gonna leave work at. That's where I'm gonna leave work at. You need to go. And on to relationships. They're all gonna speak the same lingo. Speak the same language. But even with a relationship, it's hard. Relationships, I think, like I said, even though work is like the top of my period because that's like the center of my life, relationships are probably the hardest ones to actually act on, right? Like it's pretty, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's definitely easier to say I'm not going to go out tonight, or even it's easier to say I'm going to quit my job, not quit, I'm going to put in my 2 weeks and leave on good terms. Those two, in my opinion, again, my humble opinion, are a lot easier than I'm going to break up with my 10-year-long boyfriend. That's a big decision to make. 1000%. That's a big decision to make. Like I said, work plays a big role in your life. And like I said, I'm dealing with repercussions of that to this day. However, relationships, they're neck and neck with that because, again, when time is a factor and even just emotions are a factor, emotions alone, you're so intertwined with someone, and a lot of times you feel like you need someone to survive, or you've gotten comfortable with the dynamic that you have, that you're just in pure comfortability, that it makes it nearly impossible to leave. And like I said, I've literally had friends write down on paper pros versus cons. When it gets to a place where you're like that, ooh, it's probably time to go. Yeah. Because why the fuck are we pulling out a pen and paper? Like, what? Are we really in the kitchen right now, like making a list? This can't be serious. It just can't. And that's sometimes what it comes down to. And again, that's just a silly example. But in all generality, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, are we for real? Are we seriously, like, we're seriously doing this right now? And that's what I'm saying. When your gut starts to tell you things probably aren't right, as I've said probably on every episode this season, those flags, they're not pink, they're not purple, they're not orange, they're not even maroon, they're red. Yeah. And don't ignore them. And it's hard because, like I kind of said at the beginning of the episode, it's hard, especially when it's fresh, right? If you're in a relationship that started like 3-4 months ago, sometimes you really just have to wait things out. But then the other part of your brain is like, no, I'm wasting time. And maybe that's just, the self-sabotage in me that I'm also dealing with currently that, will be another topic of conversation here. But I think there's a balance, right? There's a balance between getting dragged, as I've used the phrase, and there's letting things play out. And I have a hard time finding that balance, for sure. If we're talking about relationships specifically, and finding the balance between letting things play out and getting dragged, it's a hard game to play, especially if it's fresh. Now, if we're talking about you've been seeing this guy for like 2 years and there's still confusion, or you don't feel right in your soul, or there's uncomfortability, or there's any shade of gray, well, that's probably concerning, right? We're talking about a couple months. Again, depending on the dynamic. If you're 3 months in and like he's saying out of pocket things to you, or he's putting his hands on you, or doing something that's like absolutely sick, or again, just not aligning with your morals, coming down to that, I took it very extreme. I immediately went to like domestic abuse because if you listen to the last episode, very familiar with that topic. But even not that, like, we don't even need to take it that extreme. Even if he's just not treating you how you want to be treated, or he's not consistent, or he's not affectionate, or he's not doing the things you need him to do, it's okay to call it quits after 3-4 months. But if you're genuinely enjoying your time and you like this person, you like being around them, they make you feel good inside and they make you feel alive, and it's just fresh and you don't know what it is yet, it's okay to write it out too. Okay, it's okay to see that situation through, because depending on the circumstances, you're not going to know overnight. And I think that's why having an answer and a solution to knowing when to leave a relationship, I don't know if I have an exact answer for you. But I think the best answer that I will have to, share with people is that at the end of the day, does this person align with me morally, physically, emotionally, and mentally? And I'm talking all 4 of those. Every single one. Because if you're sitting here like, yeah, physically they definitely do, and emotionally they definitely do, but mentally and morally, I don't know about those 2. That's not good at all. It's actually probably bad. Very bad, right? And all of them. Like, even if you sat here and said, oh, well, emotionally and mentally and morally, it's good, but physically, it's not, that's bad. Okay. And I know that makes me sound like a terrible person because you're basically saying, so even though the perfect person, even though they, again, this is just a generic example, they don't know how to please me. They're not the right person. I know I'm going to sound crazy, but probably not. Because that's an essential part of a relationship. And this is my opinion. Do with this all as you'd like. But personally, yeah, if there's not an intimate connection, I have a problem. Because I know that's an important component of my life. And I know that if a person is not meeting those needs, well, then it's probably not my person. Doesn't mean they're a bad person. Doesn't mean anything's wrong with that person. It means that's not the lid to your pot, as my mom would say. Okay? That's not the lid to your pot. And again, coming full circle with my point with all three things: the party, the job, the relationship. Is it aligning with those four things? Morals, emotional, mental, physical. If it's not, why are we there? Why are we drunk until 4 a.m.? Like, what? Like, I'm not throwing shade if that's how you live. I just told you a story. I lived like that for some good time. But I now realize, what is that benefiting me? And if my only answer is, well, it's fun. I've now gotten to a point in life where that's not fun. Like, there's so many other things, like going to Bora Bora is fun. Going to Miami is fun. Going to church with my family is fun. Like, there's things that actually have fulfillment, and then there's short-term fulfillment. Now I'm getting to a whole nother conversation. But look at all these things as a whole. Why are you there? What's holding you back? Overcome what's holding you back. Always stand to those 4 pillars and know when to leave. Yeah. I could go on and on about this. I don't need to drag this episode for another 30 minutes. But I think it's an important conversation. And I think, take this podcast episode, please, and bring it up to your friends. Bring it up to your family. Bring it up to your, maybe your other coworker that's in the same boat as you, that you're both in a situation where you want to leave. Bring this up to your best friend that you've been talking about for the past 6 months about leaving your boyfriend. Bring it up to your other friend or your mom or your sister about, oh my God, you know how I missed work that one time because I was out so for it? This girl was too. Maybe don't bring that up. But my point is, it's okay to be in this situation. It's okay to be in a situation where you don't know what to do. You don't know what the right answer is, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, when you have to make that decision, which typically in these situations, it's better to deal with it head on than letting it linger. But again, only here for suggestions. Don't let it linger. Deal with it head on. And remember those 4 pillars. So anyway, I hope this episode was somewhat helpful and somewhat insightful, because I actually tried recording multiple different topics and they didn't feel right. And although this wasn't the longest episode I've had, definitely on the shorter side, actually, I'm very okay with what I had to say, because if it was insightful and it was helpful and it was impactful, then I hope you're able to leave the party. I hope you're able to leave the job. And I'm definitely hoping you're able to leave the relationship. But anyway, I'll let you enjoy the rest of your day, night, morning, whenever you're listening to this. And per usual, I'll be back on the last day of next month, because as always, I like to save the best for last. So thanks for listening, and you should go ahead and leave. Bye.